Hello, this is Angie Northey, and this is a short intro to tell you about a vlog that's accompanying my third novel, The Courtesan and the Mutineer. Now, the shots you're seeing here are of the Maldives, where I went on holiday back in 2017, as part of the novel takes place in Tahiti. And much as I'd love to fly over the other side of the world on a 25-hour flight, I haven't got the time or the money. So just showing you a bit of footage of holiday in the Maldives. Right, the locations featured will be Southwark and Borough High Street, and then over to Covent Garden, and then down to Portsmouth, and a quick look round the Victory, just to show you what ships were like in the Georgian era. And yeah, some more footage of the Maldives, just giving you a sense of what it was like on an idyllic desert island. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Okay, so here I am in Borough High Street, and this is the start of the vlog to accompany the vlog for Courtesan and the Mutineer. And this is where the action starts, in just off of Borough High Street, in what would have been called the Borough in those days, according to my Georgian A to Z. And Polly was born in a place called Black Swan Alley, and I've managed to pinpoint where the entrance to Black Swan Alley would have been. It's quite difficult because all the road alignments have changed. This viaduct has been built, and I've pinpointed it just there to the start of the viaduct there, but I'll explain later how I found it out. It was a lot of detective work, a lot of research, but I think I've pinpointed it down to there. Now, this building here, this is the only remaining building left of St Thomas's Hospital, its original site, and it dates back to the medieval days. It was St Thomas's Priory here, and they had a hospital here since the medieval times. Well, this site was built in around the 1830s, and unfortunately it was compulsory purchased in 1862 by the railway because they wanted to build this viaduct here. So they had to move to the present site of St Thomas's Hospital, which is on the south bank, on Albert Embankment, where it is today, just as you go over Westminster Bridge on the south bank there. They had to move over there, and it's still there to this day. Yeah, Black Swan Alley would have been one of the many coaching in tavern courtyards that lined Borough High Street back then, because this would have been the main thoroughfare up from the south east and all the seaports up across London Bridge and into the city. And London Bridge is just up there. That's the approach to London Bridge. Yeah, so this building would have been here in the 1780s, and like I said, it was compulsory purchase in the 1860s to make way for the viaduct. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up an original photo taken in the 1860s, and it shows this building here, and it shows St Thomas's Street, which would have been there. Now, if you can, that photo shows this building here. This was the sort of, like, if you look at it from the front, this was a right-hand building. Then you had an inner courtyard around here somewhere, and here, that's in the way. Great stuff. This would have been what's shown as the inner courtyard, and the left-hand building on that photo would have been sort of where it says Shard Centre there, and what's now called London Bridge Street, which wasn't there in the 1780s. And Black Swan Alley would have been right next to that left-hand building. And I'm going to just quickly show you how I pinpointed the entrance to Black Swan Alley, and I'm going to go and do some filming further up here. Okay, Okay, so I'm now outside what is Southwark Cathedral. Back in the 1780s, it would have been St Saviour's Church, and I'm going to sort of, you know, show you how I pinpointed the entrance to Black Swan Alley, which is sort of near where that arch is in the viaduct, sort of around there. I can't be exactly precise because all the alignments have changed. The road has changed, they've changed the alignment of the roads because they rebuilt the bridges. That's where I was standing earlier, underneath the viaduct. That's Borough High Street down there, and this is the approach to London Bridge here. Okay, so I'm just going to walk down. I'm just going to walk down these steps here into what's now called Green Dragon Court. Now, on my Georgian A to Z, this isn't called Green Dragon Court, it's actually called Chaingate. And when I saw the name Chaingate, I thought, oh, this can't be the name of the, you know, alleyway. Chaingate. It must be a Chaingate, you know. And when I went online to do a bit of research, I found a survey by a guy called John Stripe, and he actually names this alleyway Chaingate, so the map was right. Now, Chaingate met at the Congress, what was St Saviour's Church. Just go along there now. This is the viaduct here. This is all in the arches underneath the viaduct, restaurants and bars and whatnot. And Chaingate would have, like, I'm going to put up a photo of, in my Georgian, my Regency A to Z, I'm going to put up a photo. Here. And if you see, there's like a fork that goes like this. Well, I'm in the sort of right-hand fork, and that left-hand fork comes back out into Borough High Street. It's going to make me way along here. It's very busy here. Like the tourist season. Worst time to film this. Oh. Right, so on my Georgian A to Z, it actually shows this as Green Dragon Court, and that comes out onto what is now, what was back then called Foul Street, Foul Lane. Foul as in, you know, disgusting and dirty. F-O-U-L, not F-O-W-L as in chickens. Yeah, that was what they showed as Green Dragon Court there, not back there where it is now. Well, anyway, the left-hand fork of those two alleyways called Chaingate, that runs along roughly the same alignment as this tunnel under here, which is also called Green Dragon Court, on Street View anyway. And this comes out onto Borough High Street, and this follows, not exactly, but sort of the alignment of that left-hand fork bit, you know, the bit, it sort of goes like this, and it's the other bit of the fork. And this comes out onto Borough High Street again, under the viaduct. And on my Georgian A to Z, the entrance to Black Swan Alley would have been roughly in the middle of these two forks. So if I walk up to roughly the middle of where they would have been in those days, it would have been roughly here, either on the sides of the viaduct or in that archway there. And I'm going to walk across the road and do a bit of filming in what would have been Black Swan Alley. Okay. Well, I'm now standing in where I've worked out Black Swan Alley would have been, and that's where I was standing earlier, over the road there. And this is where I've sort of pinpointed it to be. This is the viaduct here. These arches here, they were sort of like commercial units. They're all being refurbished now. That's why they've got halted in front of them. But I've worked out it's roughly, now this road, I think this is London Bridge 3. This wouldn't have been here. This added, like, it wasn't on the Georgian Z, but it would have roughly ran somewhere along here. That's the Shard, by the way, that building there. It sort of gives you some bearings as to where we are. So I've worked it out as somewhere along this alignment. This would have been Black Swan Alley. Right, actually underneath the viaduct coming out of London Bridge. Yeah, so this would have been roughly where Black Swan Alley would have been, and this is where Polly was born, where she grew up, where she lived with her mum and her brothers, and where she met her odious first husband, who sort of seduced her, or basically raped her, impregnated her, and her mum forced her to marry him. Yeah, so this is where I've pinpointed it down to. Of course, everything's changed since the 1780s when the novel's set. But yeah, I'm just going to walk up here. Now, I can't get on this path because there's all hoarding here, because they're refurbishing these arches here. But I'm going to walk up here and have a look at something I saw on Street View that I find really interesting, you know, like old architecture and features and whatnot. Yeah, so I'm just going to walk along there and do a little bit of filming. Right, okay, so this is King's Head Yard. And I'm just going to film in here. This is off of Borough High Street. I'm just going to film down here just to give you a sense of what Black Swan Alley would have looked like. Now, none of the original buildings in here are existing. Like, as I said earlier, this is one of the many courtyard inns off of Borough High Street. But this is giving you an idea of what it would have looked like. This is King's Head Yard, and it would have been the inner courtyard to the King's Head Inn, and that's Borough High Street there. I mean, the inns sort of leading off of Borough High Street, like the coaching inns, they would have gone back to like sort of medieval days. But they had a massive fire here back in 1676, 10 years after the Great Fire of London in 1666, and it destroyed most of the northern part of Southwark, and it destroyed the King's Head Inn. So it was rebuilt in after the 1676 fire, but unfortunately it was bombed in the war, and in 1940 it took a direct hit from a bomb and it was completely destroyed, so it was rebuilt after the war. But I'm going to put up a picture of what it would have looked like. I think it's dated 1850, the picture. Okay, so that gives you some idea of what Black Swan Alley would have looked like. Okay, so on Street View you could actually walk through this little arch here, but obviously they've got it all blocked off because they're refurbishing it. But I'm just going to walk through here and have a look at this lovely old sign I saw on the wall on Street View. Oh, I thought so. It's all covered in hoarding now, but I'm just going to walk over there and do some, get a better view of it. So behind this hoarding, you can just about make it out there. There's a lovely old sign that it's all been rubbed off. All I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a picture. Yeah, so I'm going to put up a picture online of that sign, and it looks like it's been actually rubbed off, which is such a shame. But it said Bar Laz something, L-A-Z, something or the other, and underneath it said and like P-I-double-Z, which looked maybe something like and pizzeria. So it looks like that used to be the entrance to like an Italian bar or something. There's actually nothing behind it, so I don't know where the bar was. But all of these along here were like arches, like there, with that lovely architectural feature, which I'm sure dates back to when the viaduct was built in the 1860s. looks like, I mean, they're refurbishing, but it looks like they've actually removed that feature, which is such a shame. It's such a shame. I don't know why they've taken it down. Yeah, they've removed it. Also, I mean, I'm not going to walk around there, but also that hoarding on the corner, that was a lovely, like, you know, retail unit, commercial unit that looked like it had original features from the 1860s of a clock. I'm actually going to put a photo up of it online. Oh, it's actually, there's a picture of it there, what it looked like, but I'm going to put up a picture from Street View, which I found. Yeah, absolutely lovely, you know. I mean, it's all been, you know, it's all being refurbished. Don't know whether they're going to keep the original features there. I don't know. They've taken down this arch here. That's been removed. Yeah. But yeah, what I'm going to do now. I mean, by the way, it's got nothing to do with the novel. I just thought I'd share with you these lovely old images I found on Street View, and they look like they're original to the 1860s. Yeah, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to walk up there to the approach to London Bridge and go and film near Montague Close, because I think I've pinpointed where Angel Yard is. Now, Angel Yard was where Polly and her first husband moved to after they left Black Swan Alley. They went to live there, and I think I've pinpointed roughly where that is, and I'm just going to go over there, yeah?
Down here, be careful, son.
Right. Okay, so I'm at the entrance to steps down into Montague Close, and let's get some bearings. That's Borough High Street, which is where we've been filming, and that's the approach to London Bridge there. So I'm just going to go down into Montague Court. Right, now this is what's called Montague Court, and on my Georgianator said this is here, this exists. This goes along, and then just to the left there, there's the back of Southwark Cathedral, or what was St Saviour's Church back then. Now, on my Georgianator Z, it actually shows Angel Court just slightly to the left. The alignment is just slightly to the left, where this building is here now. And there's another little alleyway, Pepper Alley, that was slightly to the right, slightly to the north. Now, I'll just turn the camera around here and show you this. This is quite interesting because this is one of the I think it's one of the remaining arches of the original London Bridge. Not the medieval London Bridge, that one that had all the shops and the houses on it, but the one built in the 1830s, that was by John Rennie. Now you can see where I'm standing now on this level here. Originally the road level would have been here, so Borough High Street would have been here, and then you'd have had the approach up to the old medieval London Bridge there. And like, you know, the old bridge, it started to fall apart, and you know, early part of the 19th century they decided to take all the shops and the houses down, and it's, you know, it was still falling apart. So then the decision was made to replace the old medieval London Bridge with the one they put up in the 1830s, which was designed by John Rennie. Yeah, and this is part of what would have been the start of the old London Bridge, and they raised the street level, so Borough High Street is now here on this street level, and this is the approach onto London Bridge. So anyway, there, that was put up in the 1830s, so zip forward to the 1960s, and you know, car ownership had gone up, people were buying cars, people say, oh, well, I want to drive into work into London in my car, you know, and so the old bridge was getting too narrow for the traffic, you know. So unlike now, where they try and deter people driving in central London with a congestion charge and whatnot, what did they do back in the 60s? Oh, let's widen the roads and let's build more roads so we can have more cars in London. Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, so they decided to build a new bridge, and they demolished the old John Rennie Bridge and built the London Bridge they've got now, which was built in the early 70s. Yeah, so that is part of John Rennie's 1830 bridge. I mean, that was actually sold off to an American guy, and he shipped it off to a place called Lake Havasu in Arizona. And I've actually visited that London Bridge in Lake Havasu. Yeah, on holiday I went in 1982, and we did a fly job. We flew to LA. I had a car, and then we stayed with some friends of my mum and dad for the first week in LA, and then we did all the touristy sites in LA, Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm. We went down to Long Beach to visit the Queen Mary. That was great. And then we headed off into the Arizona desert, into the sunset, literally, because I remember they had lovely sunsets. And we did Grand Canyon. And one of the places we visited was the old London Bridge. And it took us like ages to get there. You're talking something like a 3-hour drive away from the nearest town. It took us ages. We drove there, and it is literally a lake in the middle of nowhere in the Arizona desert with the old London Bridge going across it, spanning it, yeah. And this awful, like, fake theme park, ye old English village, cottages built out of plywood and, mock tudor. Americans think we live in thatched cottages and, castles or whatever. But anyway, yeah, and that was it. So, it was not really that much to see. Yeah, so I'm now going down Montague Close, and I'm going to go around the back of what's now Southwark Cathedral, and show you where Holly ended up after she left Angel Court. Basically, her first husband left her. She got booted out of where she was living for not paying the rent, and she was, down on her luck. There was her and her little boy. Oh, by the way, that's the London Bridge now. That was the one put up in the 1970s. Yeah. Very, very characterless and uninspiring architecture of the 1970s, but there you go, it's very much of its time. Yeah, so she basically ended up destitute, homeless, no money, didn't want to go back home to Black Swan Alley. It was very abusive, and she was sort of sitting on the roadside here, and this woman offered her a job, and of course she thought it was just like a servant or something. And then, of course, she realises she's been lured into this brothel and ends up working as a prostitute, yeah. I mean, Southwark and Bankside was traditionally the sort of playground of the city. This would have been called New Rents back in the 1780s, yeah, New Rents. And, yeah, so all of this area would have been the sort of where they come from the city across the bridge into Southwark, and it was like a sort of it was like the Las Vegas of its day. You had brothels, stews, taverns, inns. There were bear baiting arenas, cockfighting arenas, all the theatres. I mean, Shakespeare's Globe, the reconstruction, that's over that way. They've reconstructed that, and unlike today, going to the theatre is, it's like a very highbrow cultural experience. Back then, it was a really rough thing, and been full of prostitutes and very rowdy. So it was basically, Southwark was across the river from the city, so it wasn't subject to all the strict, tough rules and regulations they had in the city. And Southwark, it didn't fall under the jurisdiction, so it didn't have any of those rules and regulations. So hence, that's why a lot of the sort of places of entertainment sprung up around here, so this would have been New Rent. So I'm just going to show you where I've set this stew where Polly ends up. It's quite hot today. It was horrible yesterday. It was thunder and lightning storms pouring down with rain all day yesterday. So, that's the replica of the Golden Hind down there. Yeah. It's Francis Drake's ship. that you sailed around the world. Yeah, it's down there, I think. Yeah, there it is. It's down there. Obviously, it's a replica. It's not the original. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take you to where I've set what I call Rochester Square. This is now called Winchester Wall. That would have become Winchester Street back in the 1780s. And this building here, this is marked up on my Georgian A to Z as it's called Rochester Yard. And yeah, I mean that's all gone now. And like this building, I think this is part of Borough Market. And judging by those like wrought iron supports there, I should think it's Victorian. But this is where Rochester Square. This is where Rochester Square would have been, and this is the stew where Polly would have worked, where she was sort of lured in with the promise of work, and it turns out it was a brothel. She sort of gets stuck there for a while. Yeah, so yeah, this bit here goes back down into Borough Market. Yeah, but yeah, that's it. This would have been new rents back then. And yeah, so after she manages to get herself away from the stew here, she goes to live in Covent Garden, and I'm going to do some filming there now. So yeah, there we go. That's it. That's Southwark, Borough High Street, and where I think Black Swan Alley would have been situated. I've sort of pinpointed it down there. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so this is Covent Garden. And this is where Polly would have lived. This is where she came to live after she left the stew in Southwark. Now, where I've got her living is sort of around this area. This is a new building now. This is a Jubilee Market that was built, I think, early part of the 20th century, I think. But I mean, those days it would have been the original Piazza buildings. And first of all she came to live here, and then when she left Styles, she moved over to the other side of the square. Okay, now Covent Garden was built in around the late 1690s, and it was built by the Duke of Bedford. So that's why all the roads around here are associated with like the Dukes of Bedford. So you've got Russell Street, Tavistock Street, Tavistock Court, Bedford Street, various different names that are associated to the Duke of Bedford. And you know, originally it was quite respectable. But as time went on, the area really fell into disrepute, and by the mid 1700s it was the main red light area of London, and it was full of taverns, brothels, stews, bagnios, which I write about in the book. I explain what they are in the book, and it really went down. It was the centre of the flesh trade. Of course now it's a massive tourist area, and I've picked the wrong time of the year to come and film it in August because it's easing with tourists and the kids are off school. But I have to film these vlogs in around days off work. I suppose I should have come and filmed it at the height of the lockdown when there was hardly anyone here. But I'm a key worker and I had to work throughout all the lockdown, so it wasn't an option. That's the London Transport Museum there, yeah. I think we took the kids here when they were a lot younger, yeah. Well, I don't know, it's probably for my benefit because I'm a history nut and a bit of a transport nerd, so ticks all my boxes. Yeah, so after Polly came to live here from leaving Southwark, she shook off the vile styles and she moved across the square, and I'm just going to go and do a bit of filming over the other side of the square. Right, so the far corner of the square was where Polly moved after she left Styles. This building in the foreground here is St Paul's Covent Garden. It was built by Inigo Jones for the Duke of Bedford
when he had this whole square built back in the 1690s. And this whole inner area is called the Piazza because the Duke of Bedford, like most aristocrats at the time, he'd been to Italy on his grand tour and he came back inspired by all the classical architecture. And this inner part here was known as the Piazza. But so it rapidly fell into disrepute and became a massive red light area. During the latter part of the 1700s, that's mid-1780s onwards, there was a massive drive to clean up the area of all the vice. And a bunch of sort of nutty evangelical religious mob sort of managed to clear it all up, but as with the oldest profession in the world, you're never going to get rid of it. It just moves somewhere else, and in this case it moved out of Covent Garden over into St James's Street in the St James's area, and that became a massive red light area. So they sort of, you know, they were halfway there. They did clear up Covent Garden. Yeah, so I'm just going to go back down here and film Tavistock Court, which is where Polly went to live with Jimmy Fitzgerald, her boyfriend, which is still there. It's actually still there. I mean, obviously the buildings aren't. That's a brand new building. That's the Jubilee Market. It was like an overspill from the old market. I think it was built in the early 20th century. So whatever buildings were there, like original buildings, would have been knocked down. Yeah, I didn't have no preservation orders or listed buildings back in those days. So yeah, it had just been knocked down. Okay. Okay, this is Tavistock Court. This is where Polly came after she went to live with Jimmy Fitzgerald. That's the London Transport Museum there. It's a bit of a nearer shot. The original building is not there. It's now, it got knocked down, and the Jubilee Hall, which was a sort of a add-on spillover from the fruit veg market, was built in the early 20th century. But this is just to show you Tavistock Court and the side entrance to the building, which I write about quite a lot, and where poor old Polly got booted out one night. Well, this would have been the side entrance to the building, and yeah, not the original building. That got knocked down, but this is Tavistock Court. This is a bit of a closer shot to where Polly would have moved to after she left the southern part of the square, and that's King Street down there, and that's where her little boy got looked after by a woman that she paid. Yeah, she didn't live here for long. She went to live with Jimmy Fitzgerald over the other side of the square, the sort of southeastern part of the square, Tavistock Court. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk down James Street and then up to what is now Floral Street. It was called Hart Street back then, and show you where Polly lived with her boyfriend, the love of her life, Bisham Andrews. Incidentally, I'll just show you this corner of the square here. There was a famous brothel there, which the woman, I've forgotten the name of the woman, and I'll put a caption at the bottom. Yeah, and I also put up some pictures of what the square looked like in Polly's time, the 1780s. But yeah, I'm just going to walk down there and I'm going to film Floral Street. Okay. Right, so this is Floral Street. Would have been Hart Street back in the 1780s, and this is where I've got Polly come to live with her boyfriend, Bisham Andrews, in one of these like rooms above these, what would have probably been shops in those days. Still the original buildings. Just to the north of Covent Garden. There's Covent Garden down there. We're in James Street. and yeah, it's just to show you where she came to live. And Jimmy Fitzgerald rescued her afterwards. And I'm not giving any spoilers away. But yeah, that was Heartstring. Okay, so this is Portsmouth Harbour, and I've come down here today to film where Polly lived for only about 3 months, but it's just to show you Portsmouth Harbour. This isn't all it goes further down, about a mile down there, but I'm only going to film here because, you know, I think back in the 1780s, I think this has probably been the main harbour. Yeah, I come down here on a train today. That's the station there. I didn't drive down here. I only got an old banger and I don't think it'd get here and back. Also, I filled up the tank last week with petrol and it was 80 quid. Yeah, 80 quid. So I thought I'd get the train down here. I've got a couple of days off work and I thought I'd come down here just to film this. This ship here, this part of the historic dockyard, and this ship is I think it's Victorian, because I've actually been here before. I came here about 10 years ago when the kids were a lot younger and they were, you know, interested in places like this. They're far too old now. They're 18 and 13, and I did ask them whether they wanted to come down here with me today. I said, I'm going down to Portsmouth. You want to come with me? And they, oh, what's there? And I went, well, I'm going to film the harbour and then go and look around an old boat. And they went, oh no, boring, I'll stay here. Like, so they're not with me today. So normally when I film these vlogs, I've got one or both of them with me, but no, they just weren't interested. You know, but that ship there, that's actually Victorian, I think. And what I'm going to do now is go in the historic shipyard and actually film around the Victory, because that was built, that was Nelson's flagship, and it was at Trafalgar, so it would have been of the time that Polly was on her ship in the 1780s. So I'm going to do a little bit of filming around there just to give you some idea of yeah, what it would have been like on a ship. It wasn't exactly the same. I've set the ship that she originally goes on out to the Pacific Islands as the HMS Valiant, which is a little bit smaller than the Victory, but sort of it'll give you some idea of what it actually looked like, yeah, and the conditions inside. So yeah, I'm just going to go over there. That's the historic dockyard, and I'm yeah, going to go and do some filming on the Victory. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'm on the upper deck of the Victory now, and great timing. I've actually gone there when they're doing a major refurb, and it's all covered in scaffolding and hoarding. Yeah, great stuff. So yeah, so I'm on the upper deck and I'm making my way up to the front part of it, the foremast, and I'm just giving you a sense of what the ship looked like at the front. These are the guns that were on the upper deck. Yeah, that's the front of the ship, and those are the buildings in the historic naval dockyards at Portsmouth. Yeah, yeah. So that's the bell, the ship's bell, and like I describe in the book, that would have been rang once every half an hour, and it indicated to the sailors when the change of shift was. So the first bell of the shift would have been rung 1 bell, half an hour later 2 bells. So at the end of the 4-hour shift, 8 bells would be rung. So that would have indicated a change of shift at 8 bells. Yeah, I'm just making my way towards the back of the ship now, so you can see a sense of how wide it would have been. Like I said in the intro, the HMS Victory is slightly larger than HMS Valiant, which is the ship Polly would have been on. but you can get a sort of rough idea. Where I'm heading now is up towards the quarterdeck, and if you can see, I don't really know what that is. I don't know what they use that for. But if you see those stairs coming into shot now, either side, they were the stairs up to the quarterdeck, and that was officers only. And Polly she's allowed to go and walk up there. It's a great privilege. The captain allows her to go and walk up there, even though she was a wife of, her husband was a gunner's mate, which is a petty officer. But yeah, she was allowed the privilege of going on the quarterdeck. That's a ship's wheel, obviously used to steer the ship. And that's another gun on the upper deck. And these quarters at the back here, this room at the back, this was actually marked up as, this cabin here is Captain Hardy, and he was the captain of the Victory, whereas Nelson was the admiral, and this would have been his quarters. This is like right at the far end of the back of the ship, and that's just showing you, quite large and spacious, because obviously he was the captain of the ship. And it was where he'd have slept, had his sort of office, have his meetings, and where he dines with various officers. Of course, all officers had servants that they had doing everything for them. Yeah, they had servants on board the ship. Yeah, and I'm just going to walk around here. This is showing this is the sleeping quarters, and this is what the captain would have slept in, a sort of cot hammock thing. Right, I'm just showing you this washstand. This was an officer's washstand. Now, when Polly was given her own little living quarters with her husband, Captain Walker actually let her have one of these washstands, which was quite a privilege, yeah. It's just showing you that. And the captain and the sort of first officer, second officer, would have slept in these like cot hammock things, yeah. So a little bit more comfortable than the hammocks that the sailors would have slept in. And I'll show you those later as I go down to some of the lower decks. But that's it. That's the upper deck of the Victory. Yeah, there's like another cot bed in there. So that would have been like one of the other officers would have slept there. Okay, yeah. So that's the upper deck. Now I've moved down a deck to the middle gun deck, and those steps are just showing you how steep those steps were and how low those ceiling bits as you walk down the steps. This is showing some of the other officers' quarters. So these cot beds, cot hammock things would have been slept in by the officers. Just showing those steep steps again, quite difficult to walk down. And this would have been where they slept and where they ate their food when they weren't invited to eat with the captain. And I'm just showing you this gun here. This is an example of one of the ship's guns, and it was huge. It was about 8 foot long. It was enormous. I mean, where it ends there is actually that's a piece of glass there, but it actually goes out the other end of there. If you can see, it's like huge. It's about 8 foot long, massive, great big gun. Imagine that thing going off. Yeah, it was huge. I think you get the idea. Ship's guns would have been a lot smaller than that. I'm surprised how big they were. Yeah, and this is where they'd have ate. This was a table for them to eat on. Yeah, and I'm just going to make my way further along the ship now. I'm at the front of the ship, the sort of foremast of the ship, and I'm making my way along. And this is just to give you an idea of this would have been the middle gun deck. All the various implements are there. They needed to fire the gunpowder. Yeah, and it's just the ceiling there, like the head height. I mean, I'm 5'8", and I could easily walk underneath that ceiling there. So it's probably about 6 foot at this stage. It got a lot lower as the decks went down. The headroom got a lot lower. That's just showing you some small arms, some muskets, and yeah, and yeah, that's the middle gun deck. I mean, obviously on HMS Valiant, that only had 2 gun decks. The Victory's got 3 gun decks. The Valiant. So I've now moved down a deck, and this is showing you the stone they used to sharpen cutlasses on. And they all had to do small arms drills, whether it was firing muskets or practicing with cutlasses. Right, I'm now walking down to I think this is a lower gun deck. I'm on my way down. I'm just showing you how steep it is and how difficult it is to walk down, and the headroom as well. You know, I mean, the headroom, that was probably about 4'8" or something, and I really had to bend down low to get underneath that headroom thing. Right, this is a sort of mock-up as to the food the sailors would have eaten. And it looks like some type of porridge with meat or ship's biscuit in it. There was a stuff called burgo they used to eat that was made of like oats. And this is a reconstruction of the galley stove where they would have cooked all the meals. And they just cooked the officers' meals and the sailors' meals on this. Yeah, it's sort of like a mock-up. And this is where the food would have been prepared in here. This was the famous ship's biscuit, the hardtack, which the sailors would have eaten when the fresh food had run out. They didn't eat it hard, they sort of soaked it in stew or soup or some kind of liquid that would have made it soft enough for them to eat, yeah. Oh, that's the famous ship's biscuit, yeah. Yeah, that's the galley. That's where they'd have prepared and cooked the food, yeah. Now I've now moved up to it's like an example of how the hammocks would have looked, which is quite important because I mention this in the book quite a lot. They'd have all slept quite close together, and each hammock was designed to be 5'6" because the average height for sailors in this time was 5'6". I mean, they wouldn't have been as cramped as that. It was a system where you had half the crew on watch, half the crew sleeping in 4-hour shifts, 4-hour watches. So not all of the men would have been sleeping together at one time. And the first trip Polly goes on, she has to share her hammock with her husband. So it would have been quite cramped. Second trip she goes on, the captain actually gives her and her husband a little bit of living space. They have a little bit of privacy because she's got a little boy with her. But yeah, that's just giving you a sense of what the hammocks would have looked like. They'd have only been slung up at night. They'd have only been hung up, like slung at night. During the day, they'd have been folded up and stored away somewhere for the day-to-day workings of the ship. Yeah, and that's the lower gun deck. And as I say, the ceiling height is getting a lot lower at this stage, and I had to really watch bumping my head. Yeah, it's a little bit. The quality is quite bad here because it was quite dark and gloomy on the ship. Right, I've now moved down into what was the orlop deck, which was underneath the lower gun deck. And this is the cockpit, and this is where the surgeon and the surgeon's mate, as the ship's doctor, would have treated the sick or the injured. And I've just shown you how low the ceiling is there. I mean, that's about 4'5" or something silly. So I had to really wash my head there, bending down. But yeah, I mean, Polly spends a little stint in the cockpit. I'm not giving her any spoilers, but yeah, she has a run-in with her husband, her second husband, Alex Lindo, and she ends up in the cockpit. And yeah, they would have brought all the sick here and anyone injured, because it wasn't just at times of war that the men would have sustained injuries. You know, it's a very dangerous job on a ship. You know, climbing rigging and lifting up heavy things, and they were always getting injured for one thing or another. Yeah, that's the surgeon's instruments, that is, and they would have used. yeah, he would have used those instruments to, amputate limbs or extract bullets, like times of war. But yeah, there was all manner of injuries and things that would have happened to the men in the course of running, having to work on the ship. Very, very dangerous, yeah. I'm just making my way to the front of the ship here, and yeah, that's showing you like a massive rope they had there. I should imagine they probably had the anchor on that. Yeah. This was the boatswain's stores, this was marked up as, and this is where all the arms were stored. And they've got these two muskets here. This is showing you, what they would have looked like, the size of them. And they'd have had muskets and cutlasses stored. And that's quite important because later on in the mutiny, this is where they go to get their weapons to carry out their mutiny. Yeah, they were kept at the front of the ship in the boatswain's stores. Yeah, that's an ammunition box, that is. Yeah, at this stage, quite low in the ship on the orlop deck, and the headroom was really low. Yeah, I'm having to bend down here to walk around, so it was really low. Yeah. Right, this is outside the ship. This is at the back, and unfortunately, this was the only part that you could see that wasn't covered with scaffolding and holding. Yeah, like I said earlier, they're doing a massive refurb of it. Yeah, but that's the back of the Victory, and it's. I mean, like I said, the Victory was 3 gun decks, and the Valiant was only 2, so they'd been slightly smaller than this. But this is just showing you that's the back. That had been all these sort of officers and the captain's quarters. And I'm just showing you these gun doors. I mean, these gun doors would have been closed when they were at sea. Obviously, moving around of the ship and the waves and whatnot, it would have flooded the ship and it would have sunk. So they'd have kept them shut when they were at sea. And they'd have opened them to fire them, because they did practice, gunnery practice. Okay, so that's another view of Portsmouth Harbour. And just to show you where Polly came after she married her second husband, Alex Lindo, for about 3 months. And she waited for him to come back from sea. Yeah, and that's it. Okay. Okay, so as I said earlier, this is some shots of a holiday in the Maldives I had back in 2017. And part of the novel takes place in Tahiti. And as I said in the intro, I'm not going to fly over the other side of the world just to do a bit of filming in Tahiti for my vlog. So, yeah, I'm going to show you, that's the chalet we stayed at, yeah. I'm going to show you, it's just a sense of what it was like on these idyllic Pacific island. I mean, obviously Maldives isn't in the Pacific, it's in the Indian Ocean, but it's just showing you what utter paradise it would have been. And after Polly disgraced herself on HMS Valiant, she was put off on Tahiti. I've actually called the island Otaheila in the book, not Tahiti. But she was put off there, and she had to live there for 2 years. Yeah, and that's me. That's my feet in the sea. It was so hot there. The Maldives are really near to the equator. It was hot. Right, this is a Ray. We went on a boat trip to go snorkeling, and on the way back to the island we were staying on, which was Kanafushi, the boat guy spotted this huge ray, and he followed it, and yeah, it was absolutely spectacular. Yeah, so absolutely spectacular. And I'm showing you these scenes because it's just giving you a sense of what the, sailors would have seen when they sailed into Matavai Bay in Tahiti. I mean, I've actually called it Otaheila in the book, not Tahiti. Yeah, so, you just got to imagine that they'd been at sea for 6 months and they hadn't been near a woman. So you can imagine a lot of blokes turning up on this island, and you can understand them not wanting to leave. Yeah, so the HMS Plenty comes to Tahiti and agrees to take Polly back to England. But about a week later, they have a mutiny. And she gets mixed up in all of this, and they end up settling on this little island. Yeah, and she gets mixed up in all that. I mean, it is heavily based on the mutiny on the Bounty, but the story, I've changed the ending to what really happened. I've changed the ending, so I can't really call it the Bounty, and I can't really use the names like Captain Bligh and Fletcher Christian. I've had to change their names, as I say, because the story doesn't end how the real mutiny on the Bounty ended. Yeah, so the real fate of all the remaining mutineers that weren't caught was quite dark. They went to live on this little island, Pitcairn's Island. And they basically started to sort of infight with each other. You know, there was about 15 or 20 of them living on this small island. They were stuck on the island. They couldn't go anywhere. And they basically got on each other's nerves, and they basically all fought each other. And in the end, there was only 2 of them left alive. And yeah, one of them was Ned Young, and I've actually called him something else in the book. I've called him Jackson Rose. And yeah, so it didn't end very well for them. But in my story, the Courtesan and the Mutineer, it ends slightly differently. They're all captured. They're all taken back to England and tried. And I won't give away what happens, any spoilers, but basically, mutiny was a hanging offence, and it sort of gives you an idea of what happens. Yeah, and Polly's mixed up in all of this, and so yeah, that's why I've had to change the names of the people and change the name of the ship. Okay, well, that's it then. Yeah. So this is the end of the vlog then, and my novel is published on Amazon, The Courtesan and the Mutineer. I'll put up a picture of it. And once again, if you want to leave any comments, good or bad, feel free to do so. Ask me any questions. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.